Autoimmune disease, it's rising, and conventional doctors have a little more to offer people other than drugs. A lot of times those drugs seem to accelerate the rate of the disease's progression. And our guest, heretic today, Dr. Terry Wahls, spent about 20 years slowly watching her health decline until she finally got the diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. And only 3 years after beginning standard therapy, she ended up in a wheelchair where she remained for 4 years until she began studying functional medicine, using supplements, and developing her paleo-inspired nutritional protocol, which is why I have invited her to be on the show to explain how she got out of her wheelchair and went back to work in today's episode.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
If you're still confused about what to eat and not getting the results you thought you'd get by going organic, go to nutritionheretic.com and download the shit list of 7 health foods to avoid like the plague for free. The shit list details what health food companies want you to believe about the crap they peddle and why the real foods they're meant to replace are far better. Stop letting big health food dump all over you and download the shit list today.
Fat is bad for you.
I just pop a pill and I'm fine.
Meat is murder.
It's time for bad food punishment. It's time for real nourishment. It's time for the Nutrition Heretic.
The following program is provided as information only and may not be construed as medical or health advice. It is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease. No action or inaction should be taken solely on the basis of the information provided here. Please consult with a licensed healthcare professional or doctor on any matter relating to your health and well-being. Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of the Nutrition Heretic podcast. This is Adrienne Hugh, the Nutrition Heretic. As usual, I'm going to start out with something that's near and dear to my heart. It's actually about my mother-in-law. She died last November. Actually, she died on my dad's birthday, to be precise. And she had suffered for the better part of, let's say, 30 years with multiple sclerosis. When I met her, she was several years into it. She was using a cane, and my husband had introduced us at a lunch, and we were eating and talking about her disorder, and she was complaining about the bus company offering a service for people who were disabled to basically get the bus to go down their street and drop them at home or wherever they needed to go. And in order to do that, you had to really prove a ridiculous amount of hardship, which basically they on the board that decides whether or not the bus could make the detour, they would have paraplegics and people who were in even worse shape than she was. So in other words, no dice on getting that to happen. But we talked about diet, and because this is when I was just learning about the role of diet in all forms of disease. And I said to her, well, did you ever think of doing something different with your diet? And she said, well, you don't know what you're going to get when you do that, which made absolutely no sense to me. She ended up putting her trust in her doctor, who, for all intents and purposes, continued to drug her very heavily throughout the rest of her life. And by the time my daughter was born 13 years ago, she was pretty much in a vegetative state, which is where she lived the remainder of her life. The last words that she said that we know of was she was holding my daughter and she said, "I love her." It's really tragic that my kids never got to know their grandmother because she was such a lovely woman. And I see people continually robbed of their lives, when they have such disorders and really have no hope, and they're given no hope by standard medicine to heal. And so for that reason, I am extremely pleased to introduce our guest heretic today. She is Dr. Terry Wahls. She is the author of the Wahls Protocol, a radical new way to treat all chronic autoimmune conditions using paleo principles. Welcome, Dr. Wahls.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. Sorry if I got a little sentimental. I told you this was an upbeat show, and then I go into that. But can you identify with what my mother-in-law was going through, where she was not, she just didn't think that she felt she was already beyond help?
Yeah, I completely accepted what my treating physicians had told me for years, and that was that progressive MS will only go downhill. Functions once lost are gone forever. Yeah, and so I had no hope of recovery. And when I began my protocol, I was doing everything that I could to slow the speed of my decline. I did not expect to recover. In fact, I didn't believe that I was, but nor did I believe it was possible.
Right. Do you consider yourself completely recovered at this point, or do you still?
Oh, no. I'm continuing to improve. I continue to get stronger. If I get exposed to a diet or environmental factor that's a problem, so if I accidentally get fed gluten, my face pain turns on to horrific levels, and I need to take high-dose steroids to get it turned off. And I continue to get stronger and stronger. I'm not as strong as I plan on becoming, and I probably don't have a completely normal neuro exam or a completely normal strength for a 61-year-old. Although some people tell me I'm stronger than most 61-year-old women, so I'm really not quite sure there. But it's very clear I continue to improve in terms of strength, stamina, neurologically. My neurologist feels I'm doing extraordinarily well, and my MRIs, show that my brain is not atrophying. My neurologist was joking. He said, he was very impressed, and he wished his brain was looking as good and robust as mine.
Right. So where were you? Like you got to a point where you were in a wheelchair.
Oh my goodness! I had 4 years in a total climb wheelchair.
Holy mackerel! Okay, so wait. Let's back up a little bit even from there. How old were you? You're 61 now. When were you diagnosed?
So I was diagnosed, 20 years ago.
Yeah. That's around the time. Yeah, that's about the same age that my mother-in-law was, like late 30s, when she was diagnosed.
Let me back up. I was diagnosed in 2000, so 16 years ago.
Okay.
In retrospect, my symptoms began when I was in medical school, and so I first began to have symptoms probably in 1980.
Okay, so 1980 till wow, that's insane. So, and then you saw when did you know there was a problem, that it wasn't just fatigue from being a medical student?
So it sort of. I knew I was having episodes of electrical face pain, which because I was a resident, I was a medical student and then a resident, there's too much work to do to go off to see a physician. And I knew this electrical pain would sort of come and go. It was worse with stress. After I finished residency, entered private practice, it finally was just so unpleasant. I finally went to see a neurologist. And so that would have been in 1987 that I saw the neurologist. And he told me I had a neuralgia, gave me some Tegretol, which was somewhat helpful, but I developed a drug rash, and then all the other drugs he tried were not helpful. Mm-hmm. Then a couple years later, I had an episode of dim vision in my left eye. Saw the neurologist on call, had a big workup, and there was no clear explanation. And then in 2000, I had a new problem with weakness in my left leg and some stumbling. That's when I went and got a big workup, including the MRI and spinal tap, and then was diagnosed with MS.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that's very similar to my mother-in-law, and I remembered her kind of pointing this out with several people. The stumbling, and sudden loss of control of one side of the body. Not quite a stroke, but but
Yeah.
just that feeling of weakness on one side of the body. So. That's a heck of a time. And then, like, once you got the diagnosis, did you go down? Did your health deteriorate more rapidly at that point? Did you find I guess my question might be, did you find whatever treatment or pain relief, whatever that they were offering you at the time, was that in any way accelerating things, or what do you think that it was just kind of the same as always?
At the time I was diagnosed, I'm an academic internal medicine doc, professor of medicine. And so at that time, I knew that within 10 years of diagnosis, one half will be unable to work due to severe fatigue. And one third will have problems walking, needing a cane, walker, or wheelchair. And so I naturally knew I wanted to treat my disease very aggressively. And I looked for the best MS center in the Midwest, which was the Cleveland Clinic. Saw people here at the University of Iowa, and took the newest drugs and continued to go downhill. Within 3 years, my disease had transitioned to secondary progressive MS, and that's the phase where there is no more spontaneous improvement.
Oh, jeez.
My neurologists were always very clear that functions once lost are gone, and so treat your disease aggressively. And then when so I took the ABC drugs. That didn't help out much. Then I took when I got in the wheelchair, mitoxantrone, which is a form of chemotherapy. That did not help. Then I took Tysabri, that first of the biologic drugs that can be so helpful for some people. That did not help. And then I started taking Cellcept, which is another form of immune suppressant drugs. And then, that was 2004. And I'm like, I'm probably going to become bedridden by my illness, quite possibly demented. And that's when I decided that I should start reading the basic science papers, because the basic scientists are discovering what we in the clinical world will be doing in 20 to 30 years.
Right.
So I start reading about the mouse and rat studies, first about drug studies, and then I finally go like, well, that's stupid. I can't get to those drugs. So then I started reading about vitamins and supplement studies, and I would begin experimenting. Adding vitamins and supplements, gradually, one by one. And my conclusion was that these things, they weren't doing a damn thing. So after about 6 months, I was pissed off and I stopped them. And I couldn't get out of bed the next day. And 3 days later, my significant other said, honey, I think I ought to take these vitamins again. And so I took them. And the next morning, I felt better and went to work. And I thought, wow, that is really interesting.
Right.
So I thought, well, let's try that again. So 2 weeks later, I stopped them, and I was immediately completely exhausted. I struggled getting out of bed, and I waited 3 days and started them up again, and then I was able to get up and function. So I was exhilarated, because now, well, maybe they must be doing something. That maybe they are slowing the decline. And so now I was really fired up about reading the basic science, paying attention, and sort of tinkering and experimenting on myself. So that was very, very exhilarating.
I can imagine. Now, when you talk about, you actually studied functional medicine, correct?
Yeah, in the summer of 2007, I discovered at the Institute for Functional Medicine, they had a course on neuroprotection, which I ordered and took. Mind you, Ms. Hugh, this is in the midst of my brain fog. So, I'm at my kitchen table going through these presentations, listening to these lectures, and my kids are laughing at me because they're like, Mom, you're going over the same material again and again. I go, yes, I know, I am. This is hard stuff. But I then created a much longer list of vitamins and supplements that I added. And I was exhilarated because, this was really getting at more of the biochemistry, more of the mitochondria. And not a whole lot was happening. And then I had really another big aha moment, which was I should reorganize that paleo diet that I've been following, but now using my long list of vitamins to figure out where that was in the food supply and organizing my diet to maximize the intake of those nutrients. And of course, that's more research and, it's a few more months of work. But in January, I had this new diet, these new list of foodstuffs to eat, which really would become the Wahls diet. And that's when the magic began.
Right. I mean, I get so many questions now from that. First of all, how would you characterize the Wahls diet or the Wahls protocol to be different from just a standard paleo diet? I see a lot of people, I've always hesitated to name anything that I do because then people get very locked into those parameters.
So let's sort of back up. So glossed over some of my story.
Oh, sorry.
I'm a farmer's daughter.
Okay.
My parents were small Iowa farmers. And during college, I rebelled by becoming a vegetarian. My parents knew I was destroying my health, and so they're very upset and berated me for doing this thing. And that just made me more stubborn. And so I would go on to be a vegetarian for about 20 years.
Ouch. Yeah.
And it was after the second year of my MS diagnosis, my Cleveland Clinic doctor introduced me to Lauren Cordain and the paleo diet. And so I read through that. And after some thoughts and prayers, I decided to go back to eating meat. Unfortunately, both my parents were dead by that time, so they never got to say, I told you so. And, I gave up all grain, all legumes, all dairy. And so I was implementing the paleo diet the way Lauren Cordain wrote about it. And I continued to go downhill. And the next year I needed a wheelchair. So the paleo diet did not fix me.
Okay.
My paleo friends get really mad that I keep saying that. But it did not fix me. Adding vitamins and supplements did not fix me. Functional medicine, adding their long list of vitamin supplements, might have fixed me, but before I gave it a long time, it did cause a dramatic change. It was when I took that long list of vitamins and supplements and said, let me reorganize my paleo diet to make sure I'm getting all these things in my diet. And what I discovered was, so I had these long list of foods to be eating. And I, was emphasizing organ meat, a lot of green leafy vegetables, the cabbage family, onion family, mushroom family vegetables, and things that were deeply colored and pigmented. And when I started emphasizing more what you need to eat as opposed to what you should not be eating,
exactly.
That is when the magic began. Many of my paleo friends are all about the meat.
Yeah.
And not much else.
Right.
And I'm all about the vegetables and enough meat so you're meeting your protein requirement, but not high levels of meat.
Right.
And I'm also very particular about what vegetable groups I want you to be eating so that we're getting foods that are going to help your brain make the brain structures that you need, help you process and eliminate the toxins that we all have stored in our body. To help you make more nerve growth factors.
Right.
And to help your mitochondria generate energy more efficiently.
Right.
So I also point out that in the paleo world, we recognize that we have many traditional societies that were hunter-gatherers that adapted their foods to what was fresh in season, locally available for that region.
Right.
And those societies knew how to create a diet that maximized nutrient density, given the foods that were available. All of us in westernized society, we don't have any of that ancient wisdom.
Mm-mm.
So we need to give our clients, my patients, a structure that they can easily remember that will let them maximize their nutrient density so their brain can build the stuff it needs to build and their mitochondria can run the mitochondrial furnace efficiently. If I just give them food lists, that's not very helpful. It's not practical. It doesn't let people adapt it to what's fresh in season and in their region.
Yeah.
And so as I was teaching these concepts, first to my veteran patients and then to the public, when I just talked about food groups and realized, no, I've got to create a teachable structure. And that's how I came up with the green sulfur color groups. And then I wanted to be sure that I could give people a way to step gradually into this diet. So that's how we came up with the 3 levels.
I see. And, this is something that I really love what you said, because it's something that I've been trying to pound through people's head, which is focus on what you want, not on what you don't want. So where a lot of diets, and probably even more so than the paleo side of the equation, would be the vegan, vegetarian side. It's like, okay, I don't eat meat, like that's just kind of the mantra. I don't eat meat. But then you look at some of the stuff people put into their bodies and you're like, seriously?
It's all sugar and white flour. They may not be eating meat, but they aren't eating protein. They aren't eating vegetables.
No.
And it's like, oh my God, you are wrecking your health.
Right. And even some of the ones who are eating vegetables, they lose their taste for vegetables. And I think there is, actually, I know I've seen this for 20 years, that the more animal foods people exclude, the more of a penchant they'll have towards sweet, because there are certain amino acid neurotransmitters that are lacking in the diet, and it drives them to crave these very unhealthy things. That's, one of the reasons why you'll see a lot of people on macrobiotics smoke. They're all about the health until it comes to cigarettes. Or, many of my vegan friends are doing all kinds of drugs and alcohol and what have you, because, there's something lacking in their brain, that their brain is like, no, I need to feel this way. Give it to me. Just make sure there's no meat in it,
And because they might have initially felt really an improvement of their health when they became vegetarian or vegan, and because they used up their micronutrients gradually and had the gradual change in their health status, it's often very difficult for them to consider the possibility that the way they've interpreted their vegan or vegetarian diet is part of their health problem.
Absolutely.
And I'll say the same thing for the ketogenic and the paleo eaters. All of us who are in modern societies, we're just trying to interpret our diets as best we can with the rules that whoever gave them to you. And we can all really wreck our health if we aren't careful about it.
Yeah.
The ketogenic folks may feel just great the first 18 months, but if they aren't really, and ketogenic diets are like vegan and vegetarian diets, they're very hard to do extremely well and maintain nutrient density.
Absolutely.
You have to really work at it. So after 18 months, if you've not been really working at it, you're depleting your micronutrients again and can have a gradual worsening of your health status.
Right. I tell everybody that.
Yeah, and the paleo eaters, particularly the people who just eat meat, are going to run into a different set of problems. Or the folks who are doing the elimination diet get a narrower and narrower and narrower list of foods that they'll eat. They can develop this orthorexia where they're literally starving themselves to death.
Absolutely.
So I get concerned when people say that their dietary interpretation is the only one that's can possibly lead to health, or that there can never be a downside, whatever their dietary regimen is.
Right. And again, that's why I've hesitated naming anything I ever recommend for people, because people are like, well, you have to give it a catchy name. And then people, will follow it. And I'm saying, but you don't seem to understand. We are cyclical. Like every other animal in the wild knows that certain times of year, certain times of day, certain things get eaten.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the human seems to want to find this nice cookie cutter road to follow and then just do that for the rest of their lives.
I'd say free living humans, traditional societies knew to not do that. The rest of us, in our mind, we're down that path. For myself, I've because I really like to follow a seasonality to my dietary choices, and I'm eating what's fresh in season and out of my garden. So I'll do a much more ketogenic focused diet during the winter, and I'm eating out of my garden during the summer. And if I'm out of ketosis, that's fine. I do a low glycemic index diet, and so I might be in and out of ketosis during the summer. But I don't mind eating my berries. I don't mind eating my squashes during the summer.
Right. Yeah, there is definitely something to be said for that. And part of the reason why I hold true to that is because I studied Chinese dietetics, and in the Chinese model, just like you said, traditional societies, traditional dietary models, you see that. And, you're, for example, you clearly cannot have wheat because of what's going on with you, but that doesn't mean that it's wrong for everyone, because in Chinese medicine, there are uses for wheat in healing the body. There's, you know what I'm saying? Like, in other words, just that anything that can be one person's poison could serve somebody else very well.
It may be okay. It may be tolerated by someone else. Yes. That is definitely true. So
if you didn't have, because you were already an internal medicine doc, if you didn't have this personal health crisis, do you think you would have ever even looked in the direction eventually of vitamins, functional medicine?
Well, I tell my followers, and whenever I'm giving this lecture, that I am profoundly grateful to become as desperately ill as I did, because that gave me the place to be willing to re-examine everything and to have to go back and relearn basic science. I had to be desperately ill to be willing to learn what I did, to discover, make all the discoveries that I have, and to now have this amazing story that I get to use to help teach other people why diet and lifestyle are so powerful. If I had been in great health, still being an athlete, still being so strong, still, doing taekwondo, all that stuff, I would probably still be a conventional internal medicine doc. And I'd still be thinking that the way to make people well is to use the latest drugs, newest technology.
Right. Did your experience and coming out almost completely on the other side. You sound like you're doing great. I mean, you were bedridden.
I'm doing very well.
You have a thriving practice now, and you're clearly not doing like 10-hour weeks. So, do you come to your job now, your work, with a different sense of compassion for the people who come through the door than you had before?
Yeah, of course. Before I began to become well, one of my partners invited me to participate in the introduction to clinical medicine, and we wrote a case where the students evaluate and learn bit by bit about clinical medicine over 4 weeks. We did a case related to the initial diagnosis of MS, and so that was a lot of fun. And normally, the person who writes the case then does a lecture about the pathophysiology of that disease. And instead, I did a lecture about what it was like to go through the evaluation and then to be diagnosed with a progressive disorder for which there's no effective treatment. And so I found great meaning and satisfaction out of teaching the medical students what it was like to take care of people with chronic diseases. In the role of physical therapy, occupational therapy, helping people find meaning in their life. So being ill taught me a whole lot about managing pain and maintaining function and making sure people have meaning in their life. And then, of course, getting to figure out that diet and lifestyle is how you, and creating health is how you treat most chronic diseases most effectively. It gave me a new point of view and a new mission that I now teach the medical students and residents and my colleagues and the public.
Right. Do you sometimes feel like you were chosen for this path? I don't know how metaphysical you get, but but I do think there is a certain blessing within disease.
And I spent a lot of time talking to everyone about this, that we have an opportunity to find a gift in our circumstances always. Mm-hmm. And that my patients who come to me with a diagnosis of cancer or a terminal illness from which they're going to die taught me fairly early on in my career that some of these folks would come in and say, cancer, it's just been such a profound gift. And I'm like, but you're going to die. I said, yes. And I know that I'm going to die. And I have this opportunity to reconcile with all these important people in my life. And now I'm going to spend my last year doing what really matters in life.
Exactly.
And so that was a very powerful lesson. As I was getting more and more disabled, I thought a lot about, okay, I have to find the gift in my illness. And my gift was that I could model resilience to my kids. I could get up and go to work no matter how tough it was. And that I thought I was going to teach my kids how to be strong by doing taekwondo and whitewater rafting and wilderness camping. But that wasn't to be. I was going to teach them resilience by modeling, going to work, staying positive, and that they would become more effective people by having chores that they really had to do because I was becoming more disabled. I remember my 10-year-old daughter complaining bitterly about having to do the laundry, that, Mom, none of my friends, they know nothing about the laundry. They know nothing about laundry soap, nothing about fabric conditioner, nothing about the cycles on the dryer or the washing machine. It is so not fair. I'm like, yep, Zeb, you're completely right. It's completely not fair that you have to do these things. It is so not fair. I understand why you're pissed off and angry, but it's also not fair that I have MS. It's also not fair that I can't stand up really anymore to doing this stuff. And I'm just really grateful I can still work. I'm not sure how much longer I can. And it's not fair, but you have to do the laundry. It's your job, and you're the one doing it. It's my job to earn money while I can. And Zach helps, make supper, and you blah, blah, blah. And then she goes, Mom, I think you are glad you have MS so you can lecture us about these things. I said, well, there is some gifts there, yes. and Zeb is sort of embarrassed now that I still tell that story. So, well, Mom, I was only 10. I said, yes, you're only 10.
And can you imagine the mouth on you?
And it was difficult, that it wasn't fair. And of course, that hardship really made you the person you are today.
Right.
And so, both my kids were, I think, much more mature and resilient than many of their friends because they had the opportunity to have chores that they knew were, needed to happen, even though they might have been cranky about it. Just like I was cranky growing up on the farm. I was mad about the chores I had to do.
Right.
And after I left the farm and went to college, man, I missed all those chores. And I brought my college friends home to help milk the cows. And that was like a huge treat with my college friends to get to help me milk the cows for a weekend.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing how so many of those skills that everybody, well, give or take, but many people at least knew how it was done, more or less, even if they didn't need to do it themselves. How the return to that and how fascinating it is for people who had never been exposed to it before. Like you said, it's such a gift. This weekend I was lucky to. We have no end of just interesting classes here in Hawaii, and I went to a beekeeping class. And just seeing well, first of all, your story about your daughter reminded me of the bees, because they have this, they're one organism. The entire colony is an organism that works for the betterment of the colony. And I say this to my kids all the time because, my daughter, she's got to clean up after dinner. One puts the dishes away, like they have their little chores that are age appropriate, putting the laundry in, folding, that kind of stuff. And they're like, yeah, my friends don't have to do this. And I'm saying, but, I want you to grow up with a sense of purpose and a sense of having a place, knowing how to take care of yourself, because God knows what tomorrow brings. And it's better for me to be here and mentor you than you not being able to do it at all one day.
Yeah. And they'll be cranky, and there'll be some days that they're happy about it, and they'll be cranky, and they'll go back and forth. But it's so helpful for us to have those conversations with our kids.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a reminder to anyone else out there who's dealing with this and still trying to meet all of their children's needs, even if their children are technically old enough to take care of some of those needs. Now, tell me a little bit about the e-stim therapy, because I found this pretty fascinating, and I've heard variations of this. How did that help you, or you believe it helps?
It's certainly been part of our protocol. The e-stim is used to provide a current over to the skin over the motor nerves that stimulate contraction of the muscle, and it is done most commonly for athletes to speed recovery after injury or after surgery. There are some studies, and I sort of keep track of this, where it's been tested now in a variety of conditions like cerebral palsy, stroke, arthritis, lung disease, heart disease, spinal cord injury. I study it in MS, and that it helps speed recovery and improve function. In people with spinal cord injury, it helps maintain bone health, muscle health, and metabolic health. Mm-hmm. It will probably never be FDA approved for any of these disease states. It may have some physical therapy indications. And for people who are willing to pay out of pocket to have test sessions to see if they tolerate it, and then work with a physical therapist to design a program, and it may be very helpful. Although not everyone can tolerate it. Some folks find the e-stim just too painful, too unpleasant, and it's just not an option for them.
Interesting. Actually, when I was reading that snippet about e-stim therapy, it reminded me of a book that I keep mentioning on this show. But there was a woman her name was Hazel Parcells, and back in the early 40s, she was diagnosed with tuberculosis and given 6 weeks to live. She was a hairdresser. And, back in those days, they had these, all those like crazy contraptions at the hair salon. And one of them was, and I think she must have done, I want to say it was like, one of those body machines, like the old belts or whatever. But she had something that she had to manually hold on to the woman for whatever fat blasting. I don't know what she was doing with it. And so she would hold this thing and she would get this electrical jolt from it. And in her book, she says that she thinks that, in addition to changing her diet dramatically and all that stuff, she felt that the reason why her kidney started to regenerate itself, because she was down to, I think, a quarter of her kidney, and next thing she knows, she goes back 6 months later, and the doctor's like, "We thought you died," and she was like, "No," and then they tested her again. They found out that she had 3/4 of her kidney now. The one that had was or 2/3 of it, the one that was decaying, and she attributed part of why she thought that was regenerating to these electrical impulses that were going through her hand at the same time that she was treating people in her salon. So I thought that was
Interesting.
really, really, really fascinating. So I always make these kind of connections when I see other books mentioning similar techniques. So we're gonna actually wrap up soon. There was one quote that I really loved from your book, where you say, or at least it was actually, I didn't get the full book. I'll be honest. I was given the kind of the foreword to the book, and you said you don't have to wait until all the proof comes in and is vetted by the medical community.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean to you now? Like, when you think about that, and so people like my mother-in-law, who's like, I'm afraid of what's going to happen because bee therapy, for example, was one of the things they were talking about 20 years ago when I met her. I don't know if that's still on the table. But
so,
what does that mean?
When I wrote the book, I explained the science of what I was doing, the science behind it, and why I designed and picked up the interventions that I did. And then said, this is my experience, and this is what I see in my clinics as I use diet and lifestyle. And then I said, these are the preliminary research that we're doing. And yes, we don't have randomized double-blind controlled trials. And of course, you never will exactly. But if you're comfortable that we have hundreds, if not thousands of studies that say eating more vegetables lowers your risk of all-cause mortality of heart disease, of neurologic disorders, autoimmune disorders, cancers, mental health problems. If you're comfortable that we have hundreds, if not thousands of papers that say doing a wide variety of stress-reducing practices lower your risk of those same diseases. And we, again, have hundreds and thousands of studies that say adding more physical activity into your life will lower your risk of all those things. And we may not have those studies for your particular disease state, but you can have confidence that there is a robust body of literature that these things are pretty safe and they're associated with improved health outcomes. And so I invite people, like, if this makes sense to you, do an experiment on yourself and see how you feel doing it.
Right.
If it doesn't make sense to you and you really need to see randomized double-blind controlled trials that have been confirmed by multiple researchers before you'll do anything, then that's what you should do.
Right.
And we have thousands and thousands of people trying these concepts and reporting wonderful success.
Right.
And I've had over 2.5 million people watch my TED Talk, and I'm sure many of those folks have gone to their doctor and say, well, what about eating more vegetables? Would that be good for me? And hopefully their doctor said, yeah. And if they didn't, they should be firing their doctors.
Absolutely. That's the one thing that scares me the most is how many doctors can be discouraging about something as simple as changing your diet. And not to something totally radical, but just, ditching the Bisquick or what is that stuff called? Is a Bisquick?
Adding vegetables. I appreciate that people have a hard time giving up whole grains.
Right.
That feels very confusing. Adding vegetables should not. Meditating should not. Moving more should not. And you could decide to give up the grain and legumes for a month. That should not get anybody into trouble. Right. And then they could decide if they want to add it back or not.
Right. Well, I think part of it is that so many people have been co-opted by the weight loss diet stuff. And they don't seem to realize that many, if not most, of the weight loss approaches are pretty unhealthy. They're starving you of nutrients, they're starving you of calories, sending your body into starvation, literally. They're not only starving on when I say nutrients, not just the minerals and vitamins, but also the macronutrients that we need as catalysts for the uptake of many of the phytochemicals, for example. And you talk about just giving these things up for a month, and it's kind of funny when you see the flags people will put up. After telling me that they've done a grapefruit diet and a bone broth diet and, something where they only ate one thing for a month or 2 months or 6 months or whatever. And then you say something like, okay, well, I think maybe whole grains should be out of the picture for now, or just grains, period, or whatever particular garlic, I know garlic sets off some people, and they'll come out at you with like, oh, well, I can't do it without the variety of foods. What am I going to eat? There's nothing left. And it's like, seriously, like, if I had a choice between MS and wheat, I'd give up wheat. I don't think that's
pretty straightforward, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you would think, but unfortunately, I guess everybody's coming at it from a different place. So I guess you just have to be patient and tolerant, and don't bitch at me if it doesn't work out. Doing it your way, okay? Just come back when you're ready. So yeah, well, congratulations to you. I mean, the fact that you've been able to turn this around, you've got family to take care of. Kudos to you. Hats off.
We're having more and more recognition. The National MS Society just gave us $1 million to conduct a research comparing the Wahls diet to the swank diet. We're recruiting people now, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how this turns out.
What's this other diet, the swank diet?
The swank diet. It's a low saturated fat diet that many in the MS community also follow. Swank used a low saturated fat diet, followed 144 people over 50 years, and did have some favorable observations. So we're comparing two diets that have some favorable research for those two diets.
Right. Well, one thing I learned early, actually even before I officially started studying nutrition, I was talking to someone at the Price Pottinger Foundation, and he said, well, what people don't realize is that any diet that focuses on real food will help, at least in the beginning.
Yes.
And it's the longer term outcomes that we're concerned about, because you have to understand when to adapt and change. But if you get stuck in this mode where just that diet, sort of what we were talking about before, just that vegan, paleo, whatever diet is the prescription, then you're just going to end up right back at square one with no other solution at hand, because you at some point you have to understand the cyclical nature of things. Once the stores, the stores of nutrients, for example, that you have been met, now you got to start tweaking and learning what other things fit into that. And that's where a lot of the eating with nature, like you talk about eating with the seasons, comes in, is that, once you get your foundation, now you can start building on top of that. So with that, I wanted to thank you so much. Again, our guest heretic today is Dr. Terry Wahls, Doctor of Internal Medicine and author of the Wahls Protocol, a radical new way to treat all chronic autoimmune conditions using paleo principles. And her website is at terrywahls.com. This grant that you got, how will you be selecting people to participate in it?
They have to be living in Iowa or one of our contiguous states next to us.
Okay.
So I'm sad to tell you that Hawaii will be too far away.
Well, we have listeners all over.
But if they live here in Iowa or one of the contiguous states, they should reach out to our study at MS Diet Study at healthcare.uiowa.edu. And what I'll do is I'll send the links to our email that people could reach out to get screened.
Awesome.
I'll send that to Crystal, so she'll have that.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. Yeah, I would, if there are people out there listening, someone who lives in one of the contiguous states with Dr. Wahls, please do reach out to her. And, through the website, we'll have the links on the blog. And again, I actually want to reiterate, I want to actually spell the name of your website, which is TerryWahls.com. I realized after I said it that some people may not know how to spell Terry Wahls. You might be Terry with an I. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much for spending the time with us today and for educating us about the fact that not everything is written in stone and that recovery is possible. And, it takes work, but it can be a gift. Really, I always think of it as a gift to thwart off anything worse down the road. So I am so pleased to literally hear you, and to hear you thriving, because unfortunately, in my experience, the closest person to me who had MS, by now she was really, she couldn't even hold her head up. So I'm actually kind of touched inside to hear someone who has overcome what you have. Thank you for being with us.
You're very welcome, Adrian.
All right. Bye-bye.
The Nutrition Heretic Podcast is a production of Savor the Journey, LLC. Our audio editor is Nikola Popovich. Our podcast manager is Crystal McLean, and our operations manager is Linda Hansen. I'm your host, Adrian Hugh, the Nutrition Heretic. You can find us at nutritionheretic.com, where you can download the Nutrition Heretic's free shit list of 7 health foods to avoid like the plague. You can also listen to previous episodes at nutritionheretic.com/podcast. Be sure to like us on social media for updates. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/nutritionheretic and on Twitter at NutriHeretic. Contact us with show ideas, questions, or if you just want to be a guest. And don't forget to rate our podcast on iTunes and Stitcher. Thanks.